Good afternoon. Thank you. I don't have that voice. Um, from Student Affairs, the Office of President and Business Leaders, we want to welcome you to our Reverend Dr. Keith Memorial. And Memorial is an awesome thing, but this is really a celebration of him, his work, his life, and the individuals that he relied upon to do his work. So understanding that at Youngstown State University, we push for social justice, we push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we push for individualism, for great work for individuals. Our program today consists of the Reverend Dr. Louis Maxwell. He is my keynote. Reverend Maxwell serves as the lead pastor of Holy Trinity Missionary Baptist Church. He is chaplain for the Youngstown Police Department, president Pastors Council, and the local coordinator for the African American No Wellness Walk in Oklahoma. He is also a contributor for the Human Rights and Safe Inspirational Expressions, and Reverend Maxwell is a proud graduate of YSU. He's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. He and his partner are doing in this ministry. They work as partners as a team. They share the love and bless his children and 8 grandchildren. And quietly have few who loves his house or Wisdom takes his chair. Still loves it. Pastor Maxson, Reverend Dr. Maxson is doing this for inspiration. How to move forward in social justice. We will end our program with Tia and look at the boys who is considered the African American national anthem. I'm going to be taking 50 years with God in mind of expressing them to
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, we need to realize and recognize that this is the best of times and the worst of times that we've witnessed. And so we're here today as partakers of the glorious divine. My challenge today is to do 2 things. One, hopefully give a good message. And second, deliver a message that will do some good. And hopefully we'll understand the purpose why we're here today is to honor the life and the legacy of not only just a hero, but also those who were allies and accomplices with him. I certainly bring greetings from the work that we've got to do in the community to this wonderful institution, recognizing the trustees, President Tressel, Ms. Bennett, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, to the faculty, the staff, to the wonderful scholars who's in this place. Having a happy peacock today. Because this is the place where I was nurtured and groomed in my academics and challenged in my thoughts. And yes, I spent some time in the TV lounge. I have an extra reminder from Gil Collins. But the flashbacks are strong enough to remind myself that the reason why I'm able to stand here today is because of the empowerment and the faculty engagement and the scholars who I interacted with to help shape and mold me to who I am today. I'm also proud to acknowledge that as the president of the Baptist Pastors Council, we have a fully endowed scholarship that is administered by the Youngstown YSU Foundation. Baptist Pastors Council it bears the name of Dr. Martin Luther King and his beloved bride. The scholarship that is provided for those who seek to pursue the ideals of Dr. Martin Luther King. Take this time to say, fund for it. See if funds are there, because we want to, again, to inspire, to encourage, and to challenge, and yes, to agitate you to a place in which you want to be a part of the work of social justice. What's important to note that as we're here today, we want to identify the fact we don't want to, what I call, cheapen the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, I'm a preacher, and I'm a Baptist preacher who enjoys the call and response. For those who know that we're talking about, and amen, every now and then we'll make the message like that. You can tell scholarship, folks, learn fast learners here. And so the reality is that if we're not careful, we will have cheapened the life and the legacy of Dr. King. The holiday is more than just a time of call. It's a day just to kind of children life, but it's a day of deliberate intentional reflection, introspection, and an examination of what can I do? What will I do? And what have I done to make my community better? It's not a time just to say, well, I can just since the beginning of the semester. Maybe I'll just catch up from reading and get ahead, or just simply chill and meditate, or just do some gaming. There's an opportunity for us to say, "Why can we go and do life?" Dr. Martin Luther King, believe it or not, he was 39 when he passed. No, I'm gonna call it when he was murdered. He was 39 years old. However, in 2022, he would be 93. And for some reason, we have kept him as a young martyr, not realizing that he would look at this situation that we're dealing with today in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and beyond with the lens of a 93-year-old wise man. He would challenge us to say, why are we dealing with the stuff today that he addressed 50, 60 years ago? Why are we still challenged and still celebrating first generation of opportunities when we should be on the fourth, fifth, and sixth? And so the challenge is for us is not to accept what has always been because it's always been that way. In fact, I believe Dr. King, he would probably not live much longer than the 39 because he was not having an evolution, but more of a revolution. And he was irritating folks, not just a few folks. He was irritating a lot of folks. Because he was evolving and he was starting to see the world through a different lens. And he was challenging those structures and systems. When he began to speak on such things as against Vietnam War, folks like, what did that have to do with civil rights movement? When he began to talk about the issues of poverty and folk dealing with a country that has plenty, we're still dealing with folk that have lack. Dr. King would be offended today to see that the successes eroded. That we're dealing with voting rights. That was an amen. We're dealing with voter suppression. We're dealing with opportunities where people should be given up to come and express their opinion at the poll, and they're finding ways to restrict, limit, and modify through documents and through legislation and through policies that he would literally today would stand up and say, have you lost your mind? The problem is that we've lost the prophetic voice to call and challenge us to go and see what we must do. Folks are still waiting for Dr. King or someone to take on the mantle. God's saying you can do it. Stop looking for other folks to do what you're capable of doing. Oh, y'all be quiet on me now. Because see, the reality is all of us have an inherent responsibility. Well, let me give you. I just said earlier, the problem I have with Dr. King's legacy is that it's being cheapened. They don't even say Dr. Martin Luther King, they say MLK. They don't acknowledge the fact that he was a scholar and he was a pastor, he was a mentor, he was a leader. They just simply cheapen him. They will do anything to celebrate. Let's go ice skating in the name of Dr. Martin Luther King. Let's go out and buy mattresses and let's sell trinkets because it's Martin Luther King Day. In other words, the day in the middle of things that are contrary to who he was. If you're going to buy a mattress, don't buy it for yourself. Buy it for someone who has a need for it. Yet still, I don't know why it is, but on Walmart, when they have their Black Friday specials, everybody's buying a flat screen TV. How many do you need? How many do you really need? And every year you got to pull up and get 3 TVs. We're a society that has consumed. We become consumers and not producers. Not recognizing that the challenges that are before us or doable. Yes, we never had a pandemic in our lifetime, but we had one. Pandemics are not new. It's new to us. And our ability or inability to adjust just shows us that the virus is able to outsmart us. Oh, y'all missed that moment. The virus is simply transform or transition or adapt to the environment which we provide for it. Which is why 3 years later, it's still struggling. And it's still reproducing. A virus looks for a host. He's a host to it. So the virus is not trying to kill us all. That's why the new version came out so that it's not as lethal. And he realized that if we go, he goes. Why is it that the virus is smarter than some of our humane actions and behaviors? That we would ignore and disregard those who are in need, those who are struggling, those who we can't help, we just ignore. Or as my mom was saying, she would see somebody who was challenged, impoverished, or struggling. She said, oh, but that's someone's child. And I appreciate her sensitivity, but Mom, if that was me, would you just want somebody to acknowledge me or help me? Because all of us can look and say that's somebody's child. All of us can just acknowledge the circumstance, but are you willing to do something about it? See, if you really be honest about the civil rights, it was about folks trying to retain and keep what they had. Because they were scared that someone would get opportunity and access would mean that they would lose something. Did I say then or now? Because that's what we're dealing with here today. When folks are trying to suppress and try to restrict us. Well, you have to understand, before we understand where we're going, let's understand what we did. Dr. Martin Luther King was evolving as a social activist. He was. See, folks want to put him in a nice little neat little package. And you can't. Because he was more diverse, and his vision was, and his dream was greater than what we saw. Because many folk want to believe that it was just a black folk led, black folk only movement. The civil rights movement had many adjectives. Dr. King understood that if he was going to live an agenda that was greater and that it is greater than the possibilities that folks saw, he realized he had to enlist and collaborate and join others with coalitions. Now today we're operating still from the silos and the ideas of if it's not my idea, if I'm not leading it, then you figure it out for yourself and I'll join you later. We have to learn how to work together. Dr. King said, or we'll just learn how to perish together as fools. When I say about dealing with the fact where we're at, in 13 years, Dr. King did what he could and galvanized the world to look at the sins of America. In 13 years, Dr. King's leadership shaped and sharpened the American civil rights movement. Just a point of history note, Dr. King was actually enlisted in Memphis for the work by a local connection. Dr. E.D. Nixon was the president of the NAACP, who literally scheduled a meeting and pretty much thrusted Dr. King into the movement. Well, I want to let you know the local connection because Reverend E.D. Nixon's brother, William Nixon, was the pastor here in Youngstown of the Ebenezer Baptist Church on Hill Street. It's not by coincidence that the church he founded on Hill Street, that sits on the hill, bears the name Ebenezer Baptist Church. It is because of the influence and relationship that they had with Dr. Martin Luther King. That's Youngstown. Well, y'all pause on that for a moment. That's Youngstown. And so you understand that the tentacles of our reach are beyond just simply here and now, but they've been long entrenched. And Dr. King, in December of 1955, when he was challenged until August the 4th, 1968, that African Americans achieved progress toward racial equality in America than what was experienced more than 3 centuries prior. Dr. King is widely regarded as America's preeminent advocate for nonviolence. See, that's what sets him apart from many other leaders, because there were some folks that really, if they had their way, they would have did it, but they would have did it nonviolent. They were on some heads. Because when the Black Panthers showed up, they said, let us show you how to keep the movement going. Y'all not ready. Y'all not ready for the real conversations. Because if we're really truly about bringing about and advancing the cause, we have to understand that we're going to embrace what Dr. King felt and what he saw and what he hoped for, then we have to work and pursue it together. Drawing inspiration, he used his Christian faith, but he also used the powerful teachings of God. He led the movement in the 50s and the 60s to achieve legal equality for African Americans in the United States. And while others were advocating for freedom by any means necessary, including violence, Dr. King used the power of his words and action of nonviolent resistance. You see, I have to understand, it was a planned act. It didn't just, most of the parties didn't decide, well, I'm just going to sit down and tired. It was a strategic move. And in fact, he wasn't the first one. There was a young lady, Claudette Poland, who was the first one that was going to be used for the city, but they opted not to because of the social stigma of the day. The young lady was pregnant. They said, well, that would be a distraction. So they said, we need to get somebody else. And so they went from the young to the elderly. Because they thought it would be a good leader in the NAACP. She was more than just a seamstress. She was part of the movement. You have to understand, Dr. King and the advocates that worked alongside him understood that it took involvement and engagement of his community to bring about it. If Dr. King just worked by himself, guess what? He was just a one-man walk. A long walk. That if he walked and worked with others, the dream would have its own life and its own energy. You have to understand that it looked like it was impossible. He had similar campaigns on poverty, international conflict. That's when folks really started getting a little bummed out by it. Because as long as he stayed in the South, as long as he stayed in Montgomery, as long as he stayed in Alabama, it was all right. When you start messing with the whole world and country, then you've got to have a conversation. See, he was not satisfied with just impacting just his narrow part of the world that he influenced with his presence. But he realized it was all encompassing. And be clear, being a leader is a challenge. Being a leader is sometimes painful, lonely, and I guarantee you, the scrutiny that he went through then, if they had public media and social media like they have today, Dr. King would have given up a long time ago. Y'all pause on that. Because we discourage and scorn individuals for being less than perfect. We expect everybody to live a blameless life, particularly if they're leading us. But the reality is, and I know I'm in a public institution, I'm going to use my freedom of speech to say, God uses who he chooses. And you notice the people that he used are not folks who are perfect, but they have failings. And it's not their failings, but God shows us that he's able to perfect his will and purpose in your life despite what you've been through. And so I don't care what you say that your story is. Your story is a testimony of your resiliency. Your ability to say, I'm more than a conqueror, and I can handle it with God. Okay. Don't you think Dr. King had some nights and some days of doubt? You don't believe it? Look at the letters of Birmingham jail. In fact, he went short of just cussing folk out. Read it. Read it. He realized he's out to make sure that I don't say anything here that's profane because folks are going to read this forever. But you can read between the lines, his heart was trying to tell folk off. Good white folk, he was telling off. Good black folk, he was telling off. He was telling everybody else that, listen, you like John the Baptist, are you the one or should I send for another? He understood that the principles of maintaining faithfulness to the principles of nonviolence was important. But he also never co-opted his message that all men and women, regardless of their color and creed, were equal members of humanity. That message is still being challenged even today. It's still being challenged today. And that's why I know that Dr. King was with us. His vision would be far reaching than what we try to make it to be. Because he was saying that if it affects you, it affects me. And if it impacts you in a negative way, it impacts me in a negative way, and we got to deal with it. Dr. King was often known for his speech, I Have a Dream. I submit to you that he was more than just a man with a dream. In fact, it wasn't the first time he gave that speech in March on Washington. In fact, he had a different speech. It was Mahalia Jackson that said, you know what, Mark, tell about the dream. You can hear her in the background. Tell about the dream, Mark. A preacher that was worth their salt knows that you always have a message in several places. You have one in your mind, you have one in your heart, and you have one in your back pocket. Okay, I stole my seminary. And so when she said, preach it, Mark, he went and he folded up the message that he had and began to speak from his heart and his mind of a dream. A dream that we're still struggling with. A dream that is still possible to achieve. It's still within our reach, but our grasp is still not. We need to take hold of the dream. He said, with all God's truth. He didn't say most. He didn't say some of just the ones we like, or the ones who look like us, act like us. You know, we have this thing about you got to be homogeneous in order to be appreciated. But we have to learn how to value people who are different from us, who think different from us, who live and believe different from us. If we're going to get it, it's interesting because I have some friends who have no problem interacting with other people's faith, except when it comes time to show faith. And I'm not trying to be critical, I'm not trying to be dogmatic, but the reality is Dr. King understood that God was bigger than our theology and our doctrines. He's bigger than that. Because if you're careful, you'll find that God can deal with all of us in our own way and our own time. This one size fits all does not fit all. Hello, somebody? You don't believe me? Go out there and buy something that's one size fits all. You're like, okay, I wasn't one of those all they were talking about. That's because we have to learn how to adjust, how to modify. Dr. King's teachings went on, whether it was talking about I Have a Dream or he was giving his Nobel Peace Prize speech. Even though those were revered and treasured oratory responses, don't ever forget about the man's heart. This man literally put his all in all on the line. And many of us, what we consider to be our all in all is really just a little sample. Dr. King, when the autopsy reports suggested that he was 39 years old, but his heart was that of a 60-year-old. In part because some of his self-inflicted behaviors. It was known he was smoking. He was a smoker. He played pool. Oh, come on. Okay, y'all ain't like, what? You play pool, you smoke. So that's what I'm saying. We have to be careful about creating gods out of folks that we don't understand their humanity. Because in the meanwhile, not only did some of his lifestyle behaviors contribute to the hardness of his heart, but the stress and the load of knowing that there were few folks that was carrying the load, suffering what he has today. Well, I'm so glad it passed. What does that mean for us today? Well, Dr. King was recruited to be a spokesman for the Montgomery boycott. He realized that he had an opportunity. 381 days that folks literally said, we're not going to catch the bus. We're going to do what we've got to do to make sure that we cripple the economy. Because they understood that if they didn't understand black folk, they understood green money. I call him every now and then because I want you to be uncomfortable. Dr. King understood it took an economic sanction to get folks to understand what it is to deal with discrepancies of a system or policy that failed to meet the needs of people. We have to learn how to be committed to a cause. We need to learn how to be committed to a cause. And truly committed. I'm not talking about a Facebook challenge. If you do it for 30 days, you say, okay, now we'll go back and do the next challenge. But to be truly committed means that you're going to make sure that you're fully committed to the transformation and the final work that you seek to achieve. And guess what? It might mean you might not get no likes or followers. You might not be the TikTok guy. You might not become virtual, but you might be the one that God is using to transform the hearts and minds of a community. It takes one. It just takes the one who understands that they've been called and they've been chosen and committed to accept the process. I remember this. In 1964, Dr. King became the youngest recipient to receive the Nobel Prize. And he came with more than just notoriety. It was that time he said that I believe that the unarmed truth and unconditional love, will also have the final words. And that is why we have to understand even today that we have to continue to struggle. I'm tired of fighting the same fights. And you might say, these are different fights. It's different fights, but still the same issue. You boil it down to it's about power, access, the resources. We're dealing with a pandemic. And again, I tell everybody, 2 years ago, I thought when they said pandemic, they meant epidemic. Because it was a word that I had not had in my lexicon. I didn't have to use the word pandemic until recently. And now we all know what one is. But we also discovered that not all things are equal for all folks. When we were learning, we're identifying the inequities and the disparities that exist in our community. And let's be clear that at the height of the pandemic, it was the best day for America. At the height of it, or I should say at its inaugural. Because we were all one, sharing toilet paper and everything. We were all one. If you had a need, I extended myself. You had a need, if I had a need, you help me. We were all in it together because we realized that the virus was non-discriminatory. Until we found out it did start discriminating. And discriminating taste. And it started to go for population. It was interesting because some of the earlier conversation was that they wanted to frail elderly. And folks were saying, well, they were going to ready to die anyway. Where's your ethics on that? So then the virus said, well, I'm not interested in old folks. I'll take some young folks. So that's why you cannot just simply ignore what happens to one, because guess what? It comes back. The pool ends. We discovered that in the midst of all of the in the height of us all coming together in a sense of coming together in unity, all of a sudden George Floyd busted everything up. And all of a sudden the energy of let's come together became very divisive. Became a challenge. And communities were grappling and still grappling with what we all saw. Some trying to rationalize, justify. Some just said it's horrible. The reality is, America was put again on notice and hasn't dealt with issues. And then we're still dealing with justice, or the lack thereof, not for all. So we say justice for all. Well, what happened January 6th, 2021? What happened? Again, it was about power. Dr. King would speak to that. Because he understood that the power of our country was built on democracy. And he saw democracy was being compromised and literally under attack, Dr. King would not have been silent about those matters. Should not be silent about those matters. Oh, well, just let them handle it. That's their problem. That's the issue. No, that's your problem. That's your children's problem. For generations to come, that when we start to discount and dismiss the reality that what if we had, let me show, let's put it this way. If Blue Black had showed up in court, I would not be delivering a message today. I would not be, because guess what? Justice would have been swift and rendered immediately. Let's just deal with that sort of reality. We still passed back. There was a black guy. And we still trying to figure out what he was doing there. And truthfully, he was too. He was just lost. He was standing like, he was standing there. We must not become silent conspirators to the issues that are affecting us in our country. We have a responsibility and opportunity. Dr. King, what do you see for America? What do you see? How are you shaping it? How are you defining it? Today, on the eve of the eve of the eve of the eve of the national holiday, we're challenged to do better, to be better, to love better, to love better. And I'm not trying to share a conversation, but I have to share this though, because I believe that's the essence of Dr. King. When President Trump was speaking to Dr. Davis, the final words of the conversation, they had the tension, they had the heated conversation, but they respected each other. Oh. The final words were, I love you, I respect you, I value you. And until we as humans start to respect everyone, even if our positions are not equal, either they differ or they challenge or they contrast directly different. We have to learn how to appreciate each other. And we start to do these things, then we'll be able to make transformation in our community. And at Youngstown, Cleveland, Warren, the Virginia Hills, the Bold Hills, the No Hills, and the Hill Street Youngstown Baptist Church area, all will start to take on the flavor of the community of people who have a beloved interest in it. You don't have to go to Atlanta to do the work. This work will be done right here in Youngstown, Ohio. You don't have to wait until folks say, we shall overcome, put their hands together and start to say, if it's in my heart, I do believe, you could do it today. Because you're equipped. You're able, you're powerful, you're called, chosen and anointed for this time. So go do the work that you've been called and commissioned to do. Don't look to your right or to your left for others to do what you've already been sanctioned to do. Because I'm a witness. He would take whatever you have to offer and would use it to advance an agenda that is greater than anyone's ever seen. Dr. King didn't wake up and said, I just want to make good people. It didn't happen that way. He was thrust into it. And I totally trust that you are thrust, pushed, corralled, and hastened to a place that you too will accept the call to transform and engage our community in a great way. May you be blessed with this strength.
Reverend Dr. Martin King, born January 15, 1929. on how your community pours into you. He was not a great orator. He didn't start out that way. His community, his church. I grew up in the Baptist church, and they would push me from people and drinking hall. They poured into him and said, "Here's your kid." He prepared himself through his education. We come from communities that don't value education. But he used his education, his scholarship, to understand humanity, to understand other religions, to understand other people. And when you're fighting against some folks who need any and everything, look at social media, you have to be ready with your facts, your books, your articles. It's like nobody else read it. Great, but you know what you know. Reverend Boniface Harden, who was my university president, he prepared us. He said, when you graduate from our university, you will know what you know, and don't let anyone tell you different. That was Dr. King. Then he took opportunities. The Montgomery bus boycott had been planned for decades, and they brought him in. And though he had some fears, he never saw it public. So he walked into spaces fearlessly. I want you young people to be fearless. And if you have some fears, if you have some work done, find your village, find your community, do it with them, and then go back. Educators, we have to pour into these young people, like Dr. King's community, Dr. King's educators poured into him. And said, and when they say, "I can't educate," that's his place. You know, we have to remember that he was transformed. And as Reverend Dr. Maxwell said, he was wrong. He was becoming a different type of person, a different type of leader. And that's not what people wanted. And during this time, only 14% of Americans followed him. And today we are. But that was not what was happening in the 1960s. Remember that. That's what I need to say to you. And lastly, if you want to become involved, we have a student government association, we have a DEI, diversity and inclusion advisory board. Dr. Mecklenburg knows some nonprofits that you can join. Or if you want to start a mentoring program, do that. Because you will change the world. We want to end with Ms. Tia Hawkins, who will be leading us in this presentation of the African American National Institute. Here, Ms. Tia. Here's his hand. Just join. Lift every voice and sing to earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the roaring sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the presence brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. What I want everyone to do on Monday is a holiday. Find something to do. Engage in a conversation. If you are only doing virtual, there are multiple virtual programs out there. Read a book. Read an article. Educate yourself, not only on the man, but the movement. And you'll find that he included a lot of people that don't get mentioned. He includes a lot of organizations that today people would find escapists. He includes the young, the old, extremely militant. Nation of Islam were his bodyguards. Think about that. Black Panther Party was there. Think about that. And other faiths were part of this movement. So when we go into our isolation, I can't be friends with you because you're Presbyterian or you're Catholic. He didn't believe in that. And even in my own experience, my pastor always told me, go out and learn about others. So I want you to do the same thing because I want you